Hello guys, what is up? Welcome to my channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you're not. I am so glad you're here, so let's jump into today's video. I try to do a video like this once a year where I go through every single book I read, give you my ratings, give you some of my thoughts in a brief synopsis so that maybe you guys can get more book recommendations if that's something that you are wanting to do in the new year. I hope this video helps you out. I debated how I was going to go about this video, but I think that I'm just going to go in order of books I read, so starting in January and ending in December. The first book I read is The Safest Lies by Megan Miranda. This was a book that was just on my shelf, and before I bought new books, I wanted to read some of them. Honestly though, I would give this a 4 stars. It took me by surprise. It's a very fast-paced YA thriller. The main character's name is Kelsey, and her mother has not been out of the house in 17 years, and then Kelsey gets in a car crash and it's on the news, and the next day her mother disappears. So everything that happens in this book is within a span of like 48 hours, very fast-paced. I like it because there's like a little teeny tiny bit of like YA romance in there, and it's obviously like a thriller. You're trying to figure out what is happening and why these series of events are happening. There's also some aspects of like newfound or like second chance friendship in this book, which I think is really cute. Honestly, I really enjoyed this one. It stood out to me. It was the first book I read this year, but it still stands out to me just because it was fast-paced. It was a quick, nice YA thriller. The next book that I read is Vanishing Girls by Lisa Reagan. Now, I read this book for the same reason as the last one. It was on my shelf and I needed to read it. However, I was expecting another YA thriller. I would not say this one is YA. This book is definitely more graphic than I thought it would be. It wasn't like disgusting, but it was just a little bit more graphic than I was expecting. And this actually happens to be part of like a 20 book series. It's like 19 or 20 books about this detective named Josie Quinn. This happens to be the first book in the series. I didn't know that when I bought it. I just got lucky. And honestly, it was a good book. I would probably give this probably like a 4.5 stars. It was really good. I'm probably not going to read the rest of the series just because I feel like I'm already so far behind in it. But if you're looking for like a good thriller series that focuses around kind of one character, I think this is a really good one. The third book that I read this year is Love from Scratch by Caitlin Hill. Again, read it for the same reason. It was on my shelf. I needed to get it read. This was really cute. This was a YA romance. There is no spice in this. It's absolutely closed door romance. It's really cute. It's an enemies to lovers. Both of the main characters in this book are interns on a cooking show, and they're kind of fighting to get the spot at the end of the summer for the show. So it is an enemies to lovers, and it's really cute. I really liked the banter in this book. For it being a cutesy little rom-com though, I do think the characters had a decent depth to them, especially the male main character. If you're looking for like an enemies to lovers YA, I do think this is a really good book. I would probably give this like a 4.2 stars. The fourth book that I read this year is my first 5-star read of the year. This is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. This is an adult thriller. Sometimes though, I think that a plot twist is like not obvious at all, and then I read the reviews and it's like, oh, that was the most obvious thing ever. I thought that the plot twists were really good in this one. I definitely didn't really see them coming. This book had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. Honestly, this was the first Frida McFadden book that I've read, and I think that I've read 2 or 3 at this point, and this one is definitely still my favorite. I need to read number 2 and 3 in this series. I have number 2, I just haven't picked it up yet. Maybe that'll be my first book next year. I don't know, we'll see. The 5th book that I read this year was another Frida McFadden. This is The Locked Door. I will say I do like The Housemaid better, but I do think this one is a solid 4 stars. I don't think it was as thrilling maybe as The Housemaid, but I did read this book, no joke, in 4 hours. I was on a bus ride and read the entire thing. This one is about a girl who, when she was 11 years old, found out that her father is a serial killer, and he's been in jail. She's had no contact with him, and then later in her life, I think she's in her 30s maybe, weird things start happening, and somebody like finds out who she is and who her father is. So that's kind of the mystery in this book, is who's doing these things to her and who knows who she is. The next book that I read this year, I read on my Kindle, and this is One and Only. It's part of a I think a 3-book series called the Wilder series, and it is written by Carla Sorensen. This was such a cute romance book. This one is a marriage of convenience, which I always just think are so cute. I love that trope. And the male main character has a daughter that he is trying to get custody for, and he's also a soccer player, so there's a little bit of that like sports romance in there. And I loved the aspect of like having the kid in there, and I just always love when books have kids, and I love when books have kids and they give the kids personalities. I hate it when I read a book with kids and it's only like stupid things that like kids would never actually say. I would probably give that book like a 4.3 stars. It's a little bit above a 4, but not quite a 5 for me. The next book that I read is King of Wrath by Anna Huang, I think is how you say it. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I know that she is a very popular book author right now, but I have actually not read any of her books other than this one. This is kind of a marriage of convenience, but it's more a marriage of convenience for her father's company and this guy, so she didn't want to get married to this guy. Dante and Vivian are the 2 main characters in this book, and I think it's a dual point of view. Yes, this is a dual point of view. I liked this book, but it wasn't like my favorite. It did not really make me want to read the rest of this series. I'm gonna give it like a 3.5. I think I read it pretty quickly, but it didn't really stand out to me against the other books that I have read this year. So I probably won't be reading the rest of this series. The next book I did talk about in my top 10 books of the year video. This is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. Before this, I had never read any of her books. I will say this is very sciencey. There's a lot of terms that I had to look up, but the main reason I read this book is because the main character's name is Elsie. And there aren't a lot of books with the main character named Elsie, so obviously I had to read it. So Elsie and Jack are the 2 main characters in this book. I just found myself relating to this character way more than I thought that I would. Not just the name. One thing, she loves cheese, which is just odd. Like that's just I also love cheese. Everybody who knows me knows that. And there was a lot of like cheese references in this book, which I thought was funny. And also she's very much like a people pleaser and struggles with anxiety. So I just related to this main character a lot. She also very much relies on academic validation. So I definitely understand that aspect of her character as well. And yeah, this was just a really good book. If you want to know more about it, I definitely recommend looking this up. I would say this one is like a 4.5 stars for me. The next book or books that I read were the entire Chestnut Spring series from Elsie Silver. Again, I kind of wanted to read this because the author has my name. These books were amazing. Now there's a lot of like controversy over which books are the best, and everybody kind of has their own opinions. I will say like almost every trope you could think of is in these 5 books, and there are a lot of tropes that I try to kind of stay away from that I actually love the way she used them in these books. So definitely give them a try, even if you think like, oh, I don't really like that stuff normally. Give them a try anyways. This is a series about 3 brothers and 2 of their friends, and obviously they're all romance books. They all fall in love, but they're all interconnected, and I love like standalone series like that. I will say these are pretty spicy, kind of graphic. Now this is the unpopular opinion. A lot of people do not like the 5th book. That's like their least favorite. I think it's my favorite one. Honestly, it reminds me of Heartland. Like that, it gave major Heartland vibes, but just like a little bit more mature and adulty. I don't remember what number we're on. I think maybe 14. The next book I read is Out of the Ashes by Kara Thomas. I think I'm gonna give this book like a 3 stars, maybe even like a 2.5 stars. I love Kara Thomas. I have loved Kara Thomas since early high school. She's really the first author that I started reading thrillers from, and this was her first adult novel. Normally she does YA thrillers. This was her first adult one, but I just thought it was lacking. I did not think the characters had very good depth. I don't think they had very good character development. They were just kind of boring. I just didn't love it. I just thought that she didn't have any personality. I honestly think that her YA ones are much better. And honestly, I don't really know why this was adult. There was one scene in there that I was like, okay, maybe this could be adult. But I recommend checking out Kara Thomas's other books, just not this one. The 15th book that I read this year is The Rule Book by Sarah Adams. Now this is a second in a series with The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams. This is a second chance romance book. The main characters are Nora and Derek, and they were together for quite a while in college, and they both kind of thought that they were going to get married and just be together forever. And then a miscommunication happened and things ended, and now it's quite a few years later. Nora is a sports agent, and obviously we know that's a very male-dominated field. She doesn't want to ruin her career opportunities, so she says like, fine, I'll put my past behind me, I'll do this with Derek, maybe he won't even remember me, and obviously he remembers exactly who she is. And they both still very much have unresolved feelings for each other. This one does have one single chapter of spice, and I like that she said in the author's note, if you prefer to keep the bedroom door fully closed, please skip chapter 34. So there's only one chapter in this book, and she lets you know which one it is, so you can prepare to skip that if you want to. I really enjoyed this. I would probably give this like a 4 stars. The next book I read is also from Ali Hazelwood. This is Bride. This is her first fantasy book ever. It's about a vampire and a werewolf. Again, marriage of convenience. She is very like independent, and she's very much kind of a people pleaser because she didn't really want this marriage, and she didn't really want things that happened in her childhood, but because her dad is so like kind of the head of the government, she knows she has to do things, and he's very like, I do what I want, like very protective of her, which is also kind of like a big trope that people like. This one was really good. I'm gonna give this like a 4.4 stars, I think. I really enjoyed this, and I'm excited to see what Ali Hazelwood has up her sleeve next for fantasy. The, I think, 17th book that I read this year is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This is a 3rd book in a series. I did not know about that, so I did have to look up some of the characters while reading this book. This was, I think, a 5 stars for me, honestly. I'm gonna give this a 5 stars. The characters in this book, yes, it's a romance book. Yes, it has some of those, like, it has a meet cute, and it has all of these like cutesy little romance aspects. But this book is so much more than that. These main characters are both genuinely struggling with real things that people struggle with. The male main character, Justin, is amazing. If you are an acts of service girly, you should definitely read this book. I don't want to talk about exactly what the book's about, but just know that this is not just a cutesy little romance. This is a little bit heavier in some parts. I picked it up expecting it to be just a cutesy little romance, and it was so much more than that. And if you're looking for something like that, definitely read this book. Plus, it literally has like the prettiest cover that I've ever seen in my entire life. The next book that I got actually was in my top 10 favorite books of the year. Gone for Gouda. It says it's a cheese shop mystery by Karina Moss. I already said that I love cheese, and I saw this at Barnes & Noble, and I was like, you're coming home with me. And honestly, it was really cute. I don't know, it was a really cute kind of like cozy mystery. Great book to read in the fall, which is when I read it. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I liked it. It's getting a 4.5. That might be a little generous. It's getting a 4 stars for me. The next 2 books that I read were both on Kindle, and they were both by Mariana Zapata. If you guys have not read anything by her, I absolutely love her writing. She's one of my favorite authors. She does slow burn romances. If you guys like slow burn, I'm talking like the book 600 pages and they don't kiss until like 598 or something, this author is for you. The first book that I read from her this year is All Roads Lead Here. This is a book about a girl who returned to the town that her mother disappeared in. And it is a romance. It's not like a mystery book, but there is slight mystery aspects in the book. And she rents out this like Airbnb place, and it's just an apartment above somebody's garage. Turns out the guy who owns it, his teenage son listed it without him knowing. And so again, there is like a kind of like a teenager kid aspect of this book that I really liked. I really liked the male main character in this book. He's so dad. Like, he's so dad. It's very much a Grumpy X Sunshine, which are pretty much all Mariana Zapata books. Slow burn, Grumpy X Sunshine. And I really enjoyed it. I would probably give that one like a 4.5. The next one that I read from Mariana Zapata is When Gracie Met the Grump. Now this is kind of her delve into fantasy. I didn't love this one as much as I've loved her other books. It's probably my least favorite Zapata book that I've read so far, but I would still give it like a 3.8 stars. I will say the beginning of this book is quite slow. There's like almost no dialogue. Her books are only one point of view. They're not dual point of view. So there's not much dialogue in the first like 100 pages. You're kind of just hearing the thoughts of the female main character. And then the banter starts, and then the banter's nice and, you know, whatever. But I liked it. Wasn't my favorite Zapata book, no, but I enjoyed it. The next book that I read is In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. This is the second in the Love Light Farms series. I did read Love Light Farms. I loved that book. I loved the two main characters in that book. I thought it was amazing. This one I also really enjoyed, but not as much. This one took me a little while to get through. I was kind of going through a slump when I was reading it. This is also a dual point of view. She is a famous influencer and he is a farmer, so very much like different lifestyles. And she is kind of trying to find herself, and I like the way that this book represented male mental health and male anxiety and just feeling like you always have to provide, and I really liked that aspect of that book. I thought that Beckett did have a nice depth of character to him. And one thing I loved about this book is Beckett is such a softie, especially for animals. I don't think I've given this one a rating yet. I think probably like a 4. The next book that I read, I actually listened to on audiobook. First audiobook I've ever listened to, and that was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read one of her books before. This one was much different. I'd read One True Loves previously. 5 stars for me. This one, I would say like a 4 stars. I like the person who voiced Evelyn, but not the person who voiced the other one. So I think that ruined it a little bit for me. Also, everybody was like, oh, there's this huge plot twist. This was actually one of the books that I kind of saw the plot twist coming, so I wasn't like shocked by it. I do like that it was kind of like a memoir kind of story, but I don't normally gravitate towards those, and so that wasn't what I was expecting when I picked this book up. It was a good story for sure, but it wasn't like my favorite book ever. Oh gosh, guys, the next book that I read, this is a reread for me. I listened to it on audiobook this time. This is my favorite book of all time, probably. My favorite romance book of all time. This is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, again, by Mariana Zapata. 5 stars every single time. It's a sports romance. He is a very, very famous football player. She is his agent. He's not very nice to her. His manager's not very nice to her. She quits. 2 months later, he shows up on her doorstep asking to marry her. Yeah, so it's another marriage of convenience, sports romance, grumpy ex-sunshine, slow burn. This is like my perfect book, okay? I will not stand for any slander on this book. I love this book. Her writing's too slow, her writing, I don't care. This is my favorite book. This was actually the first Mariana Zapata book that I had read too, and it still, after reading like maybe 6 or 7 of them, is by far my favorite one. The next book that I picked up is Done and Dusted by Lila Sage. This book was pretty popular on TikTok, and it's pretty little, so I was like, okay, I'll pick it up, I'll read it. It was good, wasn't my favorite. The main characters' names are Clementine and Luke. This is also like a brother's best friend kind of romance, a little bit of a forbidden romance because of that brother's best friend aspect. I do wish that it wasn't quite as quick. I don't know, it seemed a little rushed to me, seemed a little forced. Like, I wanted it to be a little bit more, it's kind of promoted as like an enemies to lovers, but it is dual point of view. In the first chapter, from his point of view, he's like head over heels for her. I'm like, that's not enemies to lovers. I probably won't continue to read this series, but it was a nice little romance book. Okay guys, we only have a few left. The next one I read is Fourth Wing, and I have been told many, many times to read this book. I have not read Iron Flame yet. I've never been so devastated by a book, by the ending of a book in my entire life. If you guys have not read this, I'm sorry. It's a dragon book, it's a fantasy book. I loved the banter, I loved the male main character in this book, but I also loved the female main character, because even though she was kind of smaller and, you know, it's a fantasy book, so the female main character is always some petite little fragile thing, but her mind was not fragile, and that's what I loved. She was smart, she knew what she was doing, she wanted to belong, and that's not something that you get, I feel like, in a lot of fantasy books. I liked the dragon aspect of this book too. I've never really read like a fantasy dragon book, but I thought it was really good. I will definitely be continuing this series. I don't think it's a 5 stars for me, but it's pretty close. It's probably like 4.6, 4.78. Coming off of a fantasy book, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna pick up a cutesy little romance. So I picked up The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This book was not just a cutesy little romance. Don't get me wrong. The romance aspect of this book was really good. Clementine inherited her aunt's apartment in New York City, and there are some magical aspects about this apartment, and that's how the 2 main characters meet. I love the way that this book showed grief and kind of anxiety and longing to be someone who you once were, but not knowing if that's possible anymore. I loved that aspect of this book. The romance in this book, great. That's not why I loved this book though. This book is probably very close to a 5 stars for me. And the last books that I read this year are the ACOTAR books. I've read these before. I actually listened to these on audiobook. I listened to the first 4 in the series. I don't know if I'm gonna listen to the last book. The last book's not, I don't love it that much, but the first 4 books I love, I adore. This one's a 5 stars. The 3rd book in the series is a 5 stars, and then the 1st and the 4th are probably like 4 to 4.5 stars for me. I'm not going to talk too much about these books. I'm sure that you guys know what this is. If you have made it to the end of this video, you probably care a lot about books. If you're like, I'm afraid it's overhyped, I'm afraid whatever, read it. I am not kidding when I say this series changed my life. I think about this series and these characters every single day, and I cannot wait for the 6th one to come out. If you have not read this yet, go read it. I think in total that was 30 books this year, which is kind of crazy. If you made it to the end of this video, comment 2 or 3 cheese emojis down below. And if you did, thank you so much. Seriously, it means so much to me when you guys sit here with me and listen to me yap and yap on, especially about books, and take the time to watch my videos. It really means so much to me. So thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.